Don't get excited. Don't get excited. Rain fart. That's a rainbow. What are neutrons? I missed something. Neutrons and neutrons. I missed something.
I just do things very rapidly.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, you guys. 'Tis I, Captain Madlove, coming at you live and in person from Captain's Quarters. Today, I am bringing you what is a version of my Fast and Furious but Fabulous, a way for you to sit down and hopefully, before small details knock out your miniature in about an hour and a half, and then if you want to go back to it later and get those small details, you know, maybe another 30 minutes. We have here today, what we are working with is a Great Grimoire print. This is a, I actually don't know the name of this print, but, you know, she was cute little cowgirl style. And she had just the right amount of small details and things going on that, you know, I really appreciate, you know, like a cape for movement, that sort of a thing. I think you'll notice that I have primed her black. Okay, and I did that so that we are able to utilize the black cape as actually part of our painting this day before we step away. If you decide to change the color of the cape, that's all on you. Here also we have her on a little base that is made by Elric's Hobbies. This is, I think the Cursed Cathedral is the name of this one. And you'll notice I've done a little bit of dry brushing on that just to kind of get an idea of where my lights are. I have picked up some new brushes, of which I have one of each set from Elric's Hobbies. I finally found a set of brushes that I'm actually really, really happy with, and they are not too expensive. This would be one of the dry brushes that I'm using from the synthetic set, and you will be able to, like I said, you can go right to Elric's Hobbies and you can check those out. I think that you guys will be quite satisfied. I've been using the wolf hair ones, and I can't say enough about those. Okay, that being said, let's just get onto this so that we can knock it out, okay? I am also using the Scale 75 paints here, but something that I have added that I do not normally use, but I am picking up to use for miniatures when I'm doing something really fast and I want a lot of base coat on there over the primer. I am using a couple of Pro Krill colors, a red and a blue, to get some real good coverage so that we can move along a little bit faster. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here, I am using a Nakar. It's a white by Scale 75, and I'm going to take a little bit of that, get it on the brush. I've already saturated the brush with water and made sure to take most of the moisture out, and then I will take the rest of it out on a paper towel. Like I said, I was test on my rubber glove, and we are going to do a couple of areas of dry brushing. Well, a little more like sticky brushing. I don't get the brush completely dry. But one is that we're going to be having the sun coming like this way. Okay? And so I want to get the top of her arm with a good highlight and the top of her head with a good highlight. And I'll go back for a little more. Top of that head again. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to brush this right across the mini in the direction that I want the light. Okay? Not so much the pants, but a little bit on this leg that's sticking forward. Not the back pants. A little bit here on the front. But there on the back. And what this does really, the direction that I'm choosing, really brings a heavy dynamic to your miniature so that you are able to make her stand out a little bit more on a game table. You know, when you do a fast paint job, you want to do the minimal amount of work, but we want to get the maximum effect. Therefore, Fast and Furious, but looking fabulous. All right, after we've done that, that usually dries really quickly. So we're going to get out a paintbrush here. What I'm going to do is work with something that I'm super familiar with so that I am able to just really whip this right out. First one I'm going to use is the biggest brush that I can. And in this case, I really like this new synthetic one that I got from Elric's. It seems like a really big brush to paint a miniature with, but you would be surprised. It has a very, very fine tip. and it has a really good belly on it. Okay, so what I do is I, of course, put it in the water first, and then I sap that water off, you know, so I don't have all that extra water in there. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to paint her hair. So I'm going to take a tiny bit of black. I've got a brown here. I'm going to take a tiny bit of black and add it to that brown in order to get a little bit of a deeper brown. But the other thing that I'm going to do to this is I'm going to take a tiny bit of the red that is the Scale 75, I mean the Procryl, and mix it in there to get it kind of a deep red brown. That Procryl is going to give us really good coverage. So the first thing I'm going to paint is going to be her hair. And in this particular case, because of the way we're going to do the highlights, I am not going to worry about the zenithal highlighting that I did by hand there. So that's the first thing that I do, is get her hair in. Now you'll notice that I've already painted her face, and I did that for you guys so that you could see the final results actually when I'm done. And again, I mixed a little bit of Procryl with some of that Scale 75. I believe that the color of this is leather brown. It's a brown with a little bit of red in it, which is just perfect for her hair color, because she's going to be a redhead, of course. What else would she be, right? I mean, Captain's always painting those redheads. All right, once we get that hair all blocked in, we'll come back, and then we've got these shoulder pads here that, you know, as we move down the miniature, and I'm just going to take that same brown that I have over here, that leather brown, and I'll put a little bit of it off to the side, and all I'm going to do is lighten it up just to make a little bit more dynamic head of hair. So I'll just mix a little bit of that Nacre in it, and it'll make it kind of a dusty color of brown. And then I'll come in here and I'll paint these Saucy pauldrons. And the color that we get from that is actually almost a fleshy color in a way. But we're not worried about that, because I do have a little bit of ink laid out that we can come in and doctor that with. And I hope that this stays in fairly good focus for you guys while we do this. Okay, there we go. And then we get those. You know what I should have done before I started was actually take a time, because the object here is to knock this out in 1.5 hours. Now you're going to need a couple of coats on some of these. Stress yourself not, okay? Once you get the pauldrons painted in, and the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to go in here and we're going to do these 2 flaps and her boots red. But the first red that you're going to use is going to be this is Pyrrole Red by Procryl, and we're going to use that first because it has extremely good coverage, and it's made for covering more so than glazing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come right in here. This is a dynamic playing with light, and I'm going to paint this part here that nice bright red. Okay, then I'm going to make sure that I get the edge here. Okay, and then I'm going to come and get the back. As you can see, even with the Procryl, I've chosen black, but I chose black for a reason, because even though we may paint an extra coat or two, in the long run, having that cape all painted black really works out. And it's so smooth because it's primered, you know. Alright, then we're going to come over here and we're going to do the same thing on the other one. Oops. Take some of that paint off on the paper towel there. You'll notice that I have just the front of this big long brush, but it has such a nice long throw that it really does make up for it. Okay, then we're going to come in, and in painting the boots, you know, I really don't want a lot of streaks on it. So one of the things I'm going to do here, I've got a little bit of this crimson ink, and I'm going to put that over to the side there, rinse my brush off, and then I'm going to go in for some of the Fro-Cryl, and I'm going to mix that. Now normally I don't mix with my good brush, I use the ugly brush, you guys know that. Okay, but what this does, I've added a tiny bit of retarder to the ink over here because it dries really quickly. And what this does though is it thins the paint without having to sacrifice the coverage. And when painting these boots, I'm going to make sure that I go back in and pick up all the extra that gets in between those laces. And because this paint has such good coverage, one of the other things that it has is that it dries really quickly. Okay. So we need to make sure, I'm going to work the first part of this paint off here, and one of the things we need to make sure of is that we dry that brush off and see how that has kind of accumulated in the laces there. Well, I want to go back and pick that all up. Just wipe the brush on the paper towel and pick that all up. And the reason for that is because I need those recesses for a shadow that I'm going to come in with later. After I've picked that all up, I can go back to my color and finish painting these boots, which we have found that the boots, to get a really good coverage on them and real bright red the way we like them, we do have to do at least 3 or 4 thin layers building that up. Now I want to make these boots red all the way to the bottom because the boots are part of the dynamic that we're looking for in getting that little pop on the table. Dry that out, make sure I come back and pick up those laces. All right, and that should be good for the first coat. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the same thing on the other one. Notice I'm painting across the boot this way and not going up and down. And the reason that I'm doing that is because your brush strokes on these little tiny minis oftentimes do show up. But when you put a stroke one way and then you put a stroke a second way, oftentimes you can cancel out the stroke by doing that because the layers will contradict one another, giving you more coverage effect. Okay, now just making sure I dry that brush out and come back for in between those laces. Pick that up so that I have all those little recesses to work with when I come back. I also want to make sure that I did get coverage on the feet because in this particular picture, we are getting these boots red all the way to the floor. Okay, so I go around, make sure I got the heel done, side of the boot done. All right, by the time that we are done with that, usually a couple of other areas are dry. You know, I always tell you to paint inside out. Well, that is kind of a factor. So one of the things that we're going to want to do is get this blouse. Now I've chosen this color, Nacre, because it is an off-white and by scale 75, and we don't want to use a solid white. So I will come in here with this and I will paint the blouse. First this sleeve. Now one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to take and mix a little bit of gray. All right, so I'll take some of this little black right over here and I'm going to mix a little area of gray right by it because this is going to be like under the arm. Okay, a little tiny bit of water to in that. All right, so we're going to get like in the shadows with this of her blouse, go under the arm just so that it's a little bit darker. And I'm not going to worry about the little bit of paint that I get on her corset or her cape, because they're very easily canceled out. The other thing I'm not going to worry about as I go up underneath it here is the fact that I'm painting over black, and so my coverage is not going to be perfect. But you know what? Since it's going to be in a shadowed area, it really doesn't matter. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, we're going to come on the inside of this arm, right along there, close to the cape. Hold on, I'll get that. See, right in there, close to the cape. It's kind of hard to show you in the picture, but there we go. And also we'll get like right behind the arm here. But then we will rinse that brush off, and then because you know you see a little zenithal highlighting there, so we'll come back in for that, just straight in the car, and we'll paint the front of the sleeve that color. And by that time, her first arm will be dry. You can come in with this solid Nacar. Notice the way that I did that. Okay, the order I did it in. Now we're going to do the part of the blouse that is on over her chest. Okay. You're going to have to look real closely for this, because it's not a lot of area. I noticed after I looked at her after we had had the first class that she actually has a couple of strappy buckles to go over her chest versus a whole blouse. Okay, and then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that gray and I'm going to really deepen it down. Okay, but I'm also going to add a little bit of blue to that, because that's really going to give it a, you know, reflection of the colors around it. And I'm going to go right in here and I'm going to catch these little areas that are in between these little buckles. It's just the very tip of my brush. That's the shadows of the blouse, but also, you know, because this is a blue vest, there would be like some blue in there. This area around her chest always needs a little bit more attention. Drying the brush off really good. I will go in with the Nacar again and I will get a line there. Make sure I get the part over the front. And I will get a line here. Now, even though we discolor this later, and you will clean up the skin area when you go in there, I still like it to be kind of bright when we start, because so that it shows up really good. Okay, now we've actually got that one little sleeve over here, the one in the back, that we need to get a second coat on of the Nacar, the white, because this is the part that the light is going to be announcing itself on. All right. And then we're going to swap from that to the blue. Now we're going to use the dark blue first. Okay. And we're not really going to worry as much about the that full and complete coverage as we come forward onto this light. But what I will do is I will take a little bit of this Procryl up here and I'm going to mix that into the dark blue. Okay, that's going to give us a little bit more coverage. All right, I will pat the brush off on the paper towel, and then I will come in here and I will lay this blue down, and I'm going to just go all the way out to the area that has the zenithal highlighting. I'm going to get in between the buckles, and I'm not going to stress that I might get a little bit on the buckles. All right, then I'm going to get this other side and I'm going to do the same thing, making sure to get that part that's underneath the cape. There's a little flap, and you want to kind of ease that brush in there. If it doesn't work, get yourself an ugly brush. You know my ugly brush rule, right? And just shove that paint right up in there. And we'll get this. Again, patting that off on the paper towel, and we'll come in here and we'll get all the way up to the blouse. That covered with the blue. Got a little bit on her belt. We're not going to stress that. Get a little bit underneath here because, you know, that's just sort of being blown out by the wind. Same thing here, and we do want this like an inside flap. A little bit hard to show you on the camera. I'll show you after I get it painted. It's right in there. Those little flaps in there, just get a little bit of blue. All right, and then of course we'll take that and we're going to add a little bit of black right over here in the corner where we make it really dark. And we'll come in here and I'm going to get it like in that buckle. And you know, I realize now I actually made the blue come all the way up on her when I can see that that's actually part of her blouse on that side. So let us correct course. That would make that color right there the shadow of her blouse right on her. You know, one of the reasons I did that as a shadow, if you put right here, if you were to put in that little ring, like bright white, like her blouse, you're going to end up with it looking like a big white nipple. And, you know, that just won't be good. All right. Now, once we get all that dialed in, we come back for second coats. Okay. And so this is the part where, oh, you know what I forgot to do? Hold on. We do have to put a first coat of red. Her hood is red. And I failed to get the hood, so we want to get the hood. Again, keeping that. Be sure to pat your brush off on the paper towel so that you're not releasing bunches of water from the belly. And I go all the way under, even though the shadow will be darker, we go all the way under the hood. Okay? But not this part that's in here behind her hair. We're just going to paint this top part like that, because that is a shadow, and so we don't need to paint it this really bright red. If you look really closely, you'll notice that this actually goes all the way around and under her face. Now, when dealing with a brush that is this big, you want to make sure that your tip is fine enough to go all the way in there and grab that, otherwise you will paint her face. And their face will be red. Alright, and since we're on this color now, remembering this, alright, we can come in here and do the second coat. So we've got really full and complete coverage on this, okay? We're going to come in here. I have thinned Procryl. Okay. So I'm not getting as steep of coverage as I did the first time on purpose, because we're building up to that glazing. Okay, and then by that time the hood should be dry. You can come in and do it. Okay, that's good coverage. Now we're on the boots and we're moving down a little bit lower. So although we want these boots bright, we do not have as much space to play with when it comes to details in the boots as we would up here on the cape, because the boots are smaller. So in this case, on the boots, we're going to go directly to the Scale 75 red, which I believe this red is the Arc'teryx by Scale 75. And so the first layer that I put on these boots will be of the Arc'teryx just by itself. And I'm going to skip the lace area. And I'm going the opposite direction that I went the first time. So this time I'm going up the boot with my strokes, making sure not to fill all the details. So be sure not to put too much paint on your brush so that you would be getting like all these little wrinkles filled with paint. And like I said, we're skipping that area where her laces are on purpose. When you get up into some smaller areas, sometimes you have to go the direction that the mini leads you to go. So like these little areas here at the top of the legs, we have to go the same direction we went with the other paint because of how small they are. You know, going up and down would remove a lot of paint from your brush and fill those little recesses. Skipping the laces and getting some nice coverage on the boots. There we go. And again, going the direction of the boot so that we can get that sexy coverage. The object here is going to be to get some very bright red boots. Okay, we're doing that for the dynamics of the game table. There we go. All right, now we've got that in place. The next thing that we need to do here is going to be move to those pauldrons. And again, remember we had a little bit of the nacre mixed with the brown, and I mixed a little more nacre with the brown so that we could go right at the top here where the light is and put a lighter color. And right here. The back pauldron that's behind her head, I will just give it a second coat. The plain brown will be fine. The darker brown is going to come through that because the scale 75s are made for glazing. It is not as necessary on your minis as you might think to get the edge. Sometimes painting the edge will end up ruining your presentation. Okay, now we're going to come in here and we are going to attack this blue. And what we're going to do is we're going to have that little bit of blue that we got over here, this dark blue that we mixed with a little bit of black, right? And we're just going to take that and we're going to go right in here with a little bit of that. And I'm pretty much dabbing it, okay? Like just sort of poking it in there. And that's our shadow. Okay, then I'm going to come over here on this side and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just pretty much dabbing it. It's like a little pulsing motion that I do. I want to get under there. We want to get a very fine line under this belt, under this belt. This is going to give, you know, more lift to everything. I let everybody paint the pack whatever color they want. Okay, and once we've done that, the other thing that I will do is I will come along very fine point and I will get this little tiny recess that is making that little trim stand up. Okay, once we get that in, we'll rinse off the brush and we will go back in for the dark blue plane. Okay, and then we'll take that and we'll overlap the darker black blue right to the front with this. Overlap that, not all the way to the back. Don't overlap it all the way to the back. Just about halfway. And then I'll overlap these on this side and bring it right up there to the front. And make this a little bit right here, kind of there. See how I did that? Just like that. All right. I'm going to do that again. Same dark blue. Right there at that halfway point. See where that line is? Well, I'm going to tie that in. Do you see what happened there? Do you see how it just melded? They just mixed together. Okay, and that's because these paints are designed for glazing, so we don't have to do a bunch of wet blending on our miniature. Okay, there we go. I'm going over that black. Then we made the black blue as it comes around. All right, now even it doesn't have to have dried at this point. And then what I will do is I'm going to go in for the lighter blue that I have set aside here. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I dry that brush off on a paper towel. I'm going to pick up some of this lighter blue. And in the areas where I have the light, my reminders are still on there. I'm going to sweep, getting those little wrinkles included. See what happened there? Okay, I'm also going to do this area of her breast right here on top. Okay, a little bit right here at the waist. And then I'm also going to get a little bit, oh, whoop, too much paint on the brush. I'm also going to get a little bit over here on this side because it's coming in right there. Okay, you see what happened there? There, right? Okay, then I'm going to take that same blue. I'm going to get a little bit of that in the car, and I'm going to make a lighter blue. Much lighter. There we go. We want it to be, you know, baby blue, pretty much. Just get that on the tip of my brush. Make sure that brush is nice and dabbed off on your paper towel. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to get just the top of this. Be careful that you don't just make a dot there or it looks like a nipple. Okay, we're going to get right there and we're going to pull closer. We're not following those same lines, meaning we're not going as far back as that light blue went. Okay, we're going to do that same thing over here on this side, getting a little bit less. Whoop, went a little far back there. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit right along here. That's for dynamics. I'm going to allow a little light in on the other side there just to kind of, you know, pump it up. And then I'm going to take the Nacre with what's the blues left on my brush, mix it into the Nacre so that it creates a super, super light blue. And I'm going to tip the mini and I'm going to go right along the edge of this trim with that. Just using like 2 little hairs on the front of the brush. I might even just get a couple of those wrinkles involved. Just a little bit of that highlight. Tiny, tiny spots. Okay. I don't want too many. You see how that was done? Alright, so now we got that. And if you look now, you can kind of see the wind blowing because of what's been done. Alright, so now we're going to rinse that brush off. Okay, and we're going to move to her blouse real quick. So what I did with the blouse was I took that kind of a bluish gray that was darker and I mixed it in, had everybody mix it into a wash. Okay, but I do have a little bit of yellow that's here, and a little bit of yellow in that makes it kind of dirty, and we kind of want that. It gives it a little bit of a green dirty flavor, but it's thin. I gotta get just the right color for you guys. There we go. So what you're looking at is kind of like a dirty linen color, really, and it's pretty thin. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna wash that onto the blouse. I didn't really get it in the highlighted areas as much. And I want to say that when we did this, this was the step that may have been forgotten. Anybody who's done that class. And we turned it yellow a different way. So I got a little bit of that yellow tinge going on to it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of black. Black is very strong. We want to make a gray out of that. And we want to add that to the areas that are the wrinkles and the shadows. Hopefully I'm staying on camera for you guys. But I'm also going to take and put a little bit of that in that one ring shadow area on a blouse. I feel fairly certain that we use a very, very small amount of black ink. And that is Inkintensity by Scale 75. You want to be very, very careful with it, okay? And we'll put a little bit of that thin, this gray. I'm going to take a tiny bit of that black ink and I'm going to put it in there so that you still have that discolored. And I'm going to add that to specifically the tops of the gloves and the wrinkles. A little bit in the shadows here. I'm going to keep it off the top of the arm where the highlight is. There we go. And now you'll notice that we've got some wrinkles going on and some shadows going on. All right, but then we don't want to work in that area. So we will take and we will move to taking a wee bit of this beautiful red here. reddish brown, which this is a base color for her hair. I'm going to take and mix a little yellow, and it's going to create an orange. A little lighter than that. There we go. Making sure you don't have a whole lot of water on your brush. We're going to pat this on her hair. You notice I'm going the opposite direction as the hair. This is a highlight. And we're going to do that in the highlighted area where we had that zenithal highlighting. Getting it around the face. And then I'm going to take the top here and kind of drag a little bit more highlight down, because you know that sun is... There we go. So she's got these highlights started. All right. While that's going on, we can take a little bit of that black ink again. We want to isolate that. It's lethal. And a little bit of this brown leather color. So we make a... And I'm going to take that and I'm going to put that on our pauldrons. Whoop, not that much. I did get the water out of my brush. Bad. Okay. I'm going to put this on the pauldron that's in the shadow. And what's going to happen is the ink is going to soak into the shadow areas. We'll put that back here. Okay. And while we're busy playing in that black ink, take a little bit of that black ink. I'm going to put it over here in another cup. Clean my brush. And get a little bit of this carmine. I'm going to thin that out a little bit. And then we get this kind of really dark reddish color. And what I will do with that is come in here and get the back of the hood, this side that is in the dark over here, or in the shadow rather. It's really not in the dark. And just kind of let that settle. The other thing that I'm going to do with it is I'm going to get the shadowed areas of her boots kind of washed in with it. Back those ankles, this side, right? Those wrinkles that are creating that boot top. Okay. Ankles, because they go in, right? And then I'm going to mix a little more of the black ink. So you might want to make a separate pot for that. That's much, much blacker. And I'm going to come along and I'm going to touch these areas that are inside of her laces, right? With that color. And the bottom portion of the boots where the arch goes in and the ankle goes in. I'll dry off that brush and then just kind of blend those out. Dry off that brush and pick up the little bit of excess. You don't want to leave like too much. You do want that ink to kind of spread a little bit beyond the laces. So you can see that I did that there, right? Now while we're waiting for all that stuff to dry, we can take we don't want to take plain black. And what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to mix a little bit of the carmine into it. Just a tiny bit, just so that it's not completely plain black, okay? But I do want it to be pretty black. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to go over, make sure that I didn't get any highlights on the front of her crotch here. And I'm going to go over these pants with it, cleaning up the top of the boots. And I want these pants to be black. With the exception of that little highlight I got there, I'm going to paint right up to her booty. I'm going to clean up any blue that may have gotten out of hand back there. And the boot tops. When I get to this part that's got a highlight, I'm going to rinse that brush off. I had to clean up a little bit of black. Got out of hand there. Right, and then I'm going to come for some of this gray. it's got a little bit of blue in it. And I'll take that and kind of put it across that leg there for a little bit of highlight. And I put it on while the black was wet, so just naturally they kind of melded together. It's a little bit of watercolor style wet blending there. There we go. So I can get that nice little highlight on the front of her leg. It really helps with her dynamics, you know. Okay, now while all of that is drying, before we come back to the red, we're going to get into that color of leather that we have there. The highlight on our pauldrons that we mixed a little bit of white and put another one of those. And go ahead and paint just the tops of the straps. And mostly in the front. Doing your very best at this point not to get out of the lines. Stay on top, don't worry about the edge. The other interesting thing is right here across her chest, I just tapped this one. This is a piece of leather. Just tap it with the side of the brush like that. Line those little dots up. That's good enough. Then we'll go in and we'll get that really dark brown that we use with a little bit of black in it. You can even blacken it a little bit more if you want. And then what we'll do is go around the body, right? And get that at the parts of this leather that are way recessed. And I'll drag one or two streaks out. But when I get all those areas and the shadows painted in. And sometimes I'll even go as far as to, like, beside these little buckles and things, to make a little line. Maybe even around these little parts that stick out. Sometimes I even get real crazy and I'll go in there and like get those little buckles painted with silver and whatnot. And there's another little strappy right here that gets missed a lot. If you can't paint a really fine line, do the little dot line up that I showed you and go into the back. We're using a really dark brown, right? If you make a mistake and you end up painting on her corset, you can come back in with a little bit of the black blue and you can just clean that up and feather it out to the front. It happens a lot with little areas of little tiny detail. Pick that water up. There we go. And I'm going to go back in and I'll take a little bit and go back in and make my second coat. I actually don't see another strappy. Okay. You want to get at least 2 coats on all those straps. Again, this is the lighter brown. Usually we want the darker brown will just fade right into the shadows and you won't even have to worry about it. Now I do notice that there's an area right here of her corset that is above a strap that got caught up in that. And when you notice those little things, that's your cleanup. Okay, so it's the darker blue area, which is fortunate. So I can come in here and pick that up. That strap is really, really close to the edge. And again, falling back on your ability to line up those little dots. All right. And I get that edge right there so that it becomes part of the strap. That looks a lot better. There you go. Okay. Now from this point, you're going to want to take a little bit of the Nacar, and again with the little bit of padding just to get those little bit, those dynamic highlights back. It takes layers. That's why we do it this way, is because it just looks so much better. We get so much more dynamic lighting. We'll take a little bit of that, a little bit more yellow, and come over here and mix it into the red hair highlight. But the other thing we're going to do is take a little Nakar and mix it in there, and what that's going to do is really lighten it up and give it also better coverage. It'll give it a little bit of that white glistening look, and we kind of want that. We want to make sure that brush is again patted off, and this we just can kind of pat on. Oh, that looks like that. Too much paint. That's too much paint when it does that. There we go. I get it a little bit whiter and a little bit drier. That way we can just get those bright highlights. There we go. And you don't have to keep them like all covered on the same parts either. That little bit of moving it around, it gives it a little bit of light play. Okay. All right. Now we're going to take a wee bit of this yellow. I'm going to make it into pretty much a wash. Take the brown leather. This is you want it to be real thin. Okay. And we're going to come in here and cover the black with it. And all that does is give it kind of like an older leather look, so that it's not looking like primer. Okay. I usually take a little bit of black and clean up the front so that my highlight's right where I want it. I'm going to get that highlight to more of a gray if you want, but that little bit of wash on there just really gives it a better dynamic. One of the things that we also have to remember is to take this gray and get this little blouse area so that the blouse is staying the colors that we want it. I usually take a little extra bit of that wash and come in here and really get those wrinkles defined. You know, it's part of making it look a little bit more dynamic with a little bit less work. There. See how those also makes the shirt look a little bit dirty. You can even use a little bit of that in here if you want to deepen up that part that's going up along her. We do need to take a little tiny bit of that white and just come right along here where the blouse is kind of sticking out into the light. There we go. Sort of make pop a little bit more. Okay. Now we got this little bit of the lighter leather here, and one of the things I will do is I will mix a little bit of this here, the yellowish orange, into it just to give it a little bit more lift, and just sort of boom that right along the front in the light. You see how it gives a little bit of a warm sun glow. I have to tie the two together on the side so we don't get big separations. There we go. You're going to want to take probably a little bit of that also and utilize that on the pauldron. That highlight you just made, there you go. Brighten that pauldron up a little bit in the sun. You're going to need to take this plain red, scale 75 red, and you're going to need to come in here and just cover. And because you've got such good coverage underneath of it, you're going to get a really good dynamic of red out of that. You're going to want to cover the light side of the hood. Remember that you added some shadows. And we're going to come in here and we're going to get some, you know, we're going to do something a little interesting right there, where we have a little bit of this red that is mixed with some black here. And what I'm going to do is take that and put it in the shadow. And then kind of, I made a mistake, so I'm going to erase it. That's nothing but a wet brush with very little water on it. Okay, then what I want to make sure of is that that part that is coming out into the sun you know, that stayed lighter. So making sure that I paint that back with the red there, we get that. That's what we want. Okay. I'm going to take that same color of scale 75 red, make sure we get coverage over here, even though it's to the back. We'll address that in a minute. There we go. Again with the hood, making sure we got that really dialed in and coming all the way around the shoulder there. All right, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take this Carmine mix that we have here. That's actually just the ink with a little bit of retarder in it, and we're going to give these boots a nice Carmine glaze, and this is really going to bring out the red in the boots. You'll see big time, like it really makes them look a good color of red. You'll also notice it's thin enough that you keep those shadows in your laces. And you'll notice how absolutely sensational those turned out. We'll come in there with a little bit of shadowing if there's time, right? Right now you've got some basic shadowing going on, and now what we're going to do is we're going to come in with a little bit of that black red that we made, and we're going to get some shadows painted in on the cape. So there's a little place that goes in right here. There's where it falls back right there. We're gonna again dial in those wrinkles in the hood with some of this. Get a little bit of it in her collar back there, because that'll give red in the shadows of it. We're gonna go right underneath her head there with it, again in that wrinkle. And then we're gonna get this side with it. Okay, still leaving a lot of that all the way under the hood. And of course, you know, there's this little area right there that has a good shadow. I get a little one right under her face there. I'm gonna let that dry. People choose the color for the gloves. Now, one of the things that you can do at this point is I do put a tiny bit of pure white out, and that tiny bit of pure white is to mix with the very smallest amount of black. That was too much. Smaller than that. Okay, you want to make a super light gray. And what I do with that super light gray is I come in here and I you know, you want to make sure that you've got water off your brush and that you're controlling what you're putting down. And what I do is I add the reflections to her hoops, her metal hoops, and even though sometimes they may not be showing, maybe they're a little bit in the shadow, I like to really make them pop, because those particular little details really sell it. So I'll come in here too and get these little belt buckles that she's got, or belt buckles there, retainers, belt retainers, leather retainers. Oh, got a little excited on that one. And there's these little brads that she's got that are right here. Like there's 3 of them. I won't go into the shadow with it, but I will. And this is not plain white. Okay, the plain white can be really obnoxious. I add a little bit of color to it so that we don't have that obnoxious plain white. And then you can see that those little details really kind of add more dynamic to the front of her body. Also, you kind of pulls your eye forward a little bit. By the time that you get done with those, you gotta look at maybe making a few little brighter dots on the leather here. Maybe a little bit more there. Bring it down a little, you know, get that sun shining on it. Might need to take a little bit and even soften the back up there with a little bit of the regular brown. Same thing as you come around the corner. You know, this part here is a little more in the light. You know, you can kind of play with it and decide. Now by this time you should definitely have, like, the red should be dry to where you can get into your carmine and cover your red with the carmine to get this really good deep color of red, and then also having like shadows and everything in it. Get that hood area. Then I'll show you how to do some highlights. It's really cool where your highlights don't turn out like all pink. We're going to get in here, not all the way up, just a little staggered strokes to get that red in there. And you'll notice how that really helps things stand out. Now, her boots are still kind of drying. You want to be careful when you're using inks, because they will pull holes in your paint if they're not completely dry. Now, at this point, I can take a little bit of this orangey red color, and I can do a layer over her hair. I'll want to mix a little brown in that, it looks like. There we go. And not make it so thin so it doesn't just settle into all the recesses after we just came in there and, you know, made them all dark. And then I'll kind of lighten the hair up a little bit so we get a little bit more of that red expression. And you'll notice it glazes right over and turns it a super good color. Right? If you want it darker on the back, you can just take more of the brown, mix a little bit of the red in it. You know, mixing your colors is really, really good fun. Like, that's, you get to mix whatever color, you know, you want. So we can get a little bit more red expression just by adding a little bit of that red to it. And coming up the back of the head. Okay? But what we really ultimately want is that dynamic on the table. I got a little bit of red, you'll notice on the book there. So, you know, I don't necessarily, it's okay, because her boots would probably be helping. Like, it looks like there's a little reflection of the boot, so it's not too bad. Then what I had people do was take that color that was the highlight in her hair, so it's kind of like a whitish, yellowy orange color. It's got that little bit of white in it. Drying that brush off, I had them just tap the laces. You do want to make sure you don't have like any water running off the brush, because it'll get you. And it's like, you know, the laces are shiny, little sparkles on the laces. It makes the boots stand out a little more. It takes a couple of times on those little pats to get it. And then on these highlighted areas, I took the lighter red, here, the scale 75 red, and I took a little bit of the yellow and I created a little lifted orange. Okay. And then I went in on the areas that were highlighted and I gave it a little bit of that lifted orange color, and it really sold the whole picture. Kind of where the calf was coming out, where the toe of the boot is. Even this one, even though it's in the back, you know, that light kind of coming across. I got this calf. And of course this area of the boot here. This little really made those boots express themselves. It made the cape more expressive. And then I thinned the carmine. Oh, little accent. Wet brush, clean that right up. I don't want that there. Yeah, I want that highlight there. I do not want any red there. And even though the light wasn't getting here, sometimes what I do is play a little bit just to get a little more expression from the character, you know, so that you can get it popping on the table. Just a little bit of cheating, I guess you could say. A little bit of light cheating. But I think you'll notice how that made a difference in her boots. It does take a couple layers. These strokes, I apply at a little bit of an angle. So in going all those directions, what I end up ultimately with is that the paint will look smoother. Maybe a little bit right there on the front. That one might help. Okay. And then I will go over that with Carmen once it dries. To get the final little touches. You can also use the side of the brush, a little bit more light to it. Pick it up with a little yellow. Remember to come back over this with Carmen, just to get this front part here. So. Carmen ink. Few layers of that. You'll notice it really lifts it. There I am. And like I said, everybody chooses the pack color, whatever color they want it to be, and then that's something that usually they do at home. Uh-oh. There's real trouble there. Clean brush. Erase. Okay. There we go. She actually has straps across her chest, but we never got to those. And there you are. And the last thing I remember is just it does take a little bit, so we really don't have the drying time, but it takes a little bit of time for these boots to dry once you've added those highlight colors. And after you get to the point where those are dry, then you go back in. It does take a couple of layers of that highlight color to really get it built up. And once you get those dry, then you come back in with the Carmen and you go over it. That gives them that really deep red color when you go back over them with the Carmen. And if you want your cape to look dirtier, you go in and you add some more yellow. You can paint it brown. You can paint it whatever color suits you. I think I got a little excited with the shadow right there. Nice thing about paint, right? You can fix it. There we go. There's just this one tiny area where her cheek comes together. Well, where her cape and her cheek come together, I should say. You gotta make sure you have no water on the brush when you go in there. I'm going to go in there with a brown line. And we're good to go. Okay, and then of course the face is all up to you guys. I did that just so that you guys, you know, had the face there, because I know how people are about, you know, looking at the faces. They like to see those faces, and so I did that for you guys just to make sure that you could relate. This little strap that goes right across here is always a pain in the butt, okay? Those little tiny details, those are the things that when you have your next sitting that you attack. I did get a little bit of gray in here. Yeah, that helps. Here we go. Helps with the separating. Alright. Fast, furious, but you know what? When she hits the game table, look at how good she's going to look. You got to take a little bit of light on my studio off of her because, you know, the lights are so blinding in here. But we want big dynamics on the game table. And so as you can see, she has a really good presentation with minimal amount of work. You guys can paint those gloves this nice color of brown right here to make sure that you keep everything consistent. That makes it look real good. We didn't get to the gloves in class. That's one of the things that we rarely, if ever, do get to. But it's also a small little thing that you guys can 100% handle when you get home. Alright, there it is. We'll step back if you like. Focus in. Focusing in is, let me take a little light off of her so you guys can get better representation. There we go. And I, of course, have to stop moving like a ship. It's like we're a ship or something. Alright, and I'll take some pictures and post them for you guys. And hopefully, I will see you at Gen Con. Alright, you guys, between now and then, you know the drill. Grab the paints, brushes, minis, and get your fucking paint on. Okay, bye-bye.